A lot of problems we have now with a false dichotomy on the right is really very political, because from a policy principled standpoint, a lot of people should agree on 95%, if you're a national conservative, on most of these sort of decision points, but we bifurcate along the lines, and it's really been aggravated by social media, of false choices. All right, you're a warmonger, you're a neocon, or you're an isolationist, you're a hawk, you're a dove. And obviously, none of foreign policy fits on a bumper sticker. It doesn't fit on some sort of distinction. In fact, it's governed by prudence and perspicacity, the facts that are on the ground at the given time. I think a big part of the problem, and I've seen this coming for over a decade, relates back to GWOT, Global War on Terror, and the response to 9/11. Understanding what went wrong and what didn't, and not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, and not being governed by the failures of the past to approach the challenges of the present. So obviously it's poignant for people roughly my age that came of military age around 9/11, and we've all seen so many people come back in body bags, thousands of lives lost in Iraq, Afghanistan, a little bit in Syria, and elsewhere, with these endless interventions where we were engaging in social work in a combat zone. Clearly, we actually weren't doing that much warfare. We were engaged in social work in a combat zone. Thousands killed, tens of thousands injured, even more with PTSD, several $1 trillion spent. And we look back, and what do we have to show for it? You know, if anything, until very recently, and I want to get to that, Iran actually became stronger as a result of a lot of our actions in the Middle East. And their hegemony was at its peak before Israel knocked them down the last year and a half. So rightfully, a lot of people on the right looked at that and were so disgusted by it. I was writing about this as a writer, as a speaker, as a podcaster, really starting in 2009. I said, these conservative think tanks that failed us at the time, stay the course, stay the course. Stay what course? What is it you're accomplishing? What land are you holding on behalf of whom in what sustainable way? And this was the problem for a long time. Well, it's kind of like, someone who gets into a car accident because he veers too much into the left guardrail and gets injured, and he has PTSD from it, he has trauma from it, and every time he's on the road, he makes sure he tilts the steering wheel the other direction. Well, maybe you could do that a little bit to overcompensate for a little period of time, but obviously, eventually, you have the same problem. And, in politics, this is not just true of foreign policy, it's true of everything. Politics really is a circle, not a spectrum. And when you're governed just by, I hate the other side, I just don't want to do the neocon stuff, I don't want to do war, I hate war. Well, eventually what happens is you land back into the same Wilsonian neoliberalism of, promoting Gaza, promoting Qatar, promoting the Palestinians, promoting all this nonsense. It's almost like you want to get involved on their behalf. And wait a minute, no. Here's what went wrong, real briefly, post 9/11. 9/11 at its core obviously was an immigration problem. If you don't let them in, they couldn't have done that harm. It was a visa problem, immigration problem. Rather than shutting off immigration from those countries, we decided to, by my count, double to triple our intake from places like that. The King Abdullah Scholarship from Saudi Arabia, we brought in about 50,000 often in a given year, 300,000 from China. I love our president very much, but 600,000 from China ain't going to cut it. We need zero. But the point is, it was an immigration problem. Secondary, it was a subversion problem. We found out, I didn't kind of know what a Muslim was at the time, hear about it on the news. And we started to realize, wait a minute, you had all these mosques where these 9/11 hijackers went. You had all these Muslim Brotherhood organizations that supported all this. Wait, this is happening in our country. That should have been the focus. Instead, what we did is, I would argue, we didn't engage in war for 2 decades. We engaged in social work in a combat zone. We put our soldiers precariously flung out on the ground between Sunnis and Shias, trying to hold ground for them, we all remember the purple fingers. That's where I went off that movement, the Iraq war, with the purple fingers. Look at their institutions we're building. And then each side would blow our soldiers up as we were fighting to hold ground for the other side. And it was just intractable tribal civil wars, and it just made no sense. It's not a matter of, are you pro-war or anti-war, or, hawk or dove, or intervention or non-intervention. It was untenable what we were doing. That was the problem. So because of this trauma that people have from it, people associate any sort of tough stance, whether it's diplomatic, deterrent, or even use of the military. We do have $1 trillion military annual appropriation we have for a reason. We associate that with, oh my gosh, we're going to get more Baghdad, Kabul, and then we're going to get sucked in, and then thousands are going to die. And certainly, obviously, we don't have time to get into this, but we all saw this when, Israel attacked Iran. And this wasn't even us doing it. Maybe we offered some logistical support for air bases. And I remember it was July 4th weekend. And I was like, we're going to die. Oh my gosh, it's happening. Like, chill out, have a barbecue, enjoy Independence Day. You don't have to do anything. Before we even understood what was going on, within 24 hours, they had it all done. They had their airspace taken care of. This was Israel. It wasn't even us doing it. And then it was a matter of, once their air defenses were down, does Trump want the honors of coming in with the B-2s? And he did it. And I think what Trump demonstrated is he eschewed this false dichotomy. Rather than this hold and build, we don't want war, but when it's needed, strike and maneuver. And that's what it was. Israel didn't lose a single soldier in that entire operation. And one of the things we need to be thinking about is they spend a fraction of what we spend. Why do we not achieve the same results? You look at Yemen. We lost a plane doing I don't know what there, but it is important we protect our shipping lanes. Israel seems to have attacked them stronger with less resources. But the broader point is, what we learned from there is, you go, and when necessary, when you identify a threat to our strategic interests, you look at the ROR. We all don't want the nutcase mullahs having nuclear weapons. So Trump blew up, broke their stuff. You kill their stuff, you break their stuff, and you leave. The way to break this sort of trepidation and fear is to break the Colin Powell doctrine, that if you break it, you own it. No. So the Wilsonians believe that, and then the reactionaries to that believe that. So they're saying we can't defend ourselves because it's going to necessarily lead to Baghdad and Kabul and that dynamic. No, actually, you break their stuff and you leave. If the regime is weakened and it falls, it falls. If not, that's their problem. They'll deal with it. That's what America First means, and that's what we saw. It's not that everything is perfect there, but that the ROR on dropping a couple bombs and setting back their entire nuclear program, you compare that to the 20 years that we did with GWOT, and obviously you see the difference there. And just yesterday, we saw another great example of, I think, the Trump doctrine on this, that eschews this false dichotomy. Western Hemisphere, we need a New Monroe doctrine where, with Israel taking more of an assertive role there, we don't need to mollycoddle them and throw too much money at them, but we certainly shouldn't restrain them. They take care of the Middle East. We need a bigger emphasis on Southcom, Northcom, Indo-Pacific Com than CENTCOM. I think we should also rethink, frankly, what we're doing with CENTCOM based in Qatar, given their motivations. So just yesterday, the president blew up a ship that was headed for America with poisonous drugs. This was not getting on the ground in Venezuela, dealing with the tribal warfare, dealing with different factions. We have $1 trillion military. It's there for a reason. And he blew up their stuff and done. And obviously, it would be great to have no kinetic action, no war, but war does have a way of finding you, and not all war is defined by what we experienced those 20 years. We should be able to experience that. If you look at Israel, how often do they occupy a country and build their infrastructure? No, they strike and maneuver as they see necessary. We could have our debates over which maneuver they do is in our interest, not in our interest, but we need to mimic that modality of military use when it is in our when it is in our interest. Strike and maneuver, not hold and build. So I think just to kind of land the plane here, how do you identify your priorities? So obviously, as the 9/11 Commission said, but we failed to heed it, the cornerstone of national security is homeland security. So the first concentric circle is our own homeland. We should not divest, as we're talking about today, we should not divest our influence from the world where we see it necessary, but we absolutely should divest foreign influence from America. And, there's a lot of talk about foreign influence. I am fine, and I actually think we should pursue a bill to bar all foreign lobbying. Why should we have foreign lobbying in this country? Now, certain quarters of the online reactionary right, or whatever you want to call it, will make it all about Israel. But the reality is, Qatar Akbar, Qatar not only has a greater dollar amount of lobbying for 300,000 people, they have actually 2/3 the budget of China, which of course we shouldn't allow either. And this is all old data. So no foreign influence. I think we should bar foreign lobbying. Visas, we have to correct the 9/11 dynamic. Any adversarial nation, there's no visas. And that's not just the Islamic nations where we don't have enough vetting. It's a cultural problem. We know that. We don't want to become Europe. The president has said that many times. That travel ban needs to expand because some of the countries where we take the most from, we actually didn't put on the list because, we do have relations with them. But ironically, by the way, it's some of the countries where we have good relations because they suppress radical Islam, some of the former Soviet satellites, but the people that come here are the refugees being persecuted by those governments. We certainly don't want that. Sadat, pioneered that, sending the Muslim Brotherhood here. So we don't want that. We need to divest from Qatar. I don't understand how the funder and the home base of the Muslim Brotherhood, whose modality of attack is subvert the West by their own miserable hands. They fund education. They fund the universities. They fund mosques, Turkey as well. And the lobbying is, some of our top officials are Qatari lobbyists. Everywhere you look, it's Qatar. So if we want to end it. And that begins with Qatar. No good could come from that. To the extent people are bothered by Israeli lobbying, which I don't like any foreign lobbying, by the way, by a country mile, you should be bothered by Islamic influence. To that end, we should have absolutely no funding of education and religion on our soil by adversarial nations. So Turkey, Qatar, that's got to end. You have a First Amendment right to religion. You do not have a right as a foreign nation to fund it. I believe Dave Bratt, former congressman, friend of mine, he actually had an old bill doing that. The Muslim Brotherhood needs to be designated a terrorist. Heck, Jordan and Egypt and maybe the UAE, a bunch of Arab countries were behind on that. Western countries that are more hospitable to the Muslim Brotherhood than a lot of Islamic countries that are actually, some of them are starting to be a little bit enlightened on that. And then obviously once we deal with the immigration and the subversion, which was the antecedent to the entire, circumstance that led to 9/11, then you go to our border. Obviously, the border is mainly an immigration problem, but to the extent that we have a national security problem, we have to make sure we don't GWOT our border. So a lot of people are like, we should focus on Mexico, not the Middle East. Right, but not the same way we did. We don't need the train and equip, and we're going to work with the Mexican government. None of that. We need a buffer zone. That's what our military does right. You don't cross this line, we zap you. You're never going to fix the narco culture there, and we don't have time. We don't have place for that. Now, with that said, the next concentric circle is Latin America. And as Anna said, as we empower allies to deal with other parts of the world, like the Middle East, we absolutely need to make sure that we reverse this tide of Russia, China, Turkey, and Iran building ports and infrastructure. The president was absolutely right to go after the Panama Canal as one of his first foreign policy goals. China's obviously building a canal in Nicaragua. That needs to be countered. And, again, I think yesterday the president really took that step with his airstrike there as well. And then when you move out of our world, our hemisphere, again, there's shipping lanes. I think shipping lanes are important. That gets back to Madison and Jefferson. I heard some saying, Trump's becoming a neocon with the Houthis. Well, you can't block the shipping lanes. Again, that doesn't necessitate getting on the ground in Yemen and refereeing Al-Qaeda of Arabian Peninsula versus the Shiites. No, none of that. You will not block the shipping lanes. We could create a kill zone, and that's what our military is designed for. And just one more thing on that. Every year we have a NDAA, a Defense Authorization Bill. We're supposed to have an authorization bill where we focus on policy and our national interests. And then we have an appropriation bill to fund based on that. But every year, the big focus on all sides is it $968 billion? Is it $942? What's the appropriation? The NDAAs need to become about policy. What do we need, and therefore what hardware needs to backfill that? And again, I think we need to ask, why does Israel seem to succeed with a fraction of their Air Force is like a joke compared to what we have. They were the sorties they were running, they were running on fumes, and they got the job done. Why do we seem to lose a lot of planes? We have mishaps, we have problems. That needs to be dealt with. And finally, we need to move away from this train and equip the Lebanese armed forces, which have not shown that they're divorced from Hezbollah, building billion-dollar embassies in Beirut and Baghdad. So then we have to defend it in again, the opposite of strike and maneuver. And by the way, there's a lot of people who accuse Israel and others of getting us sucked into interventionist Wilsonian stuff. But in reality, it's because we're into the Palestinian state and building the Lebanese armed forces and the Syrian this and the Baghdad embassy this. So then we spread out our soldiers precariously throughout the Middle East. And then every time Israel wants to do a strike and maneuver that's not just good for them, it's free for us. Oh, we can't do it because it's going to inflame the Arab Street, or it's going to put our bases in danger. We'll freaking get them out of there. Okay, so this is really a more restrained foreign policy in the Middle East actually should work in concert with not restraining Israel. Again, you don't have to mollycoddle them. Let them do their thing. We do ours, so we could focus on our homeland, our hemisphere. So much more to say, but I know you're going to have a heart attack here, so thank you for the time. I'll just say, we have to remember on this and many other policies in the time we live in, Psalm 34, turn away from evil, but pursue good. I think we have a good understanding on the right what evil is. We don't like the Democrats. We don't like the neocons. We don't like this. But that's not enough. You have to have affirmative, positive beliefs, because otherwise you'll just land back in the same direction you don't want to, that you were running from to begin with. Thank you so much for indulging me. Thank you so much for coming, and God bless you all.